I never thought I'd be that guy, the one who gets cheated on. It's always something that happens to someone else, right? But here I am, typing this out as I sit in my car, parked at a quiet spot off the road, trying to catch my breath after the whirlwind of the past few weeks. Let me give you some background on me and my wife, Sarah. We've been married for 7 years. On the surface, we had a pretty ideal life. We had a cozy little home in a suburb of Atlanta, 2 kids, and a dog. My friends would joke about how she was the perfect wife. I guess when you hear that often enough, you start to believe it. But things started to change. It was subtle at first, little things like her getting home late from work or being too tired for a cuddle after dinner. I attributed it to stress. After all, she was the breadwinner, and I was juggling my freelance gig while managing our kids. In December, things took a strange turn. The holiday spirit that usually filled our home felt hollow. I noticed she had sand in her shoes one day when she came home from her supposed work trip. I asked her about it and she brushed it off, claiming she had taken the kids to a sand sculpture festival in the city. It sounded odd, but I let it go. I should have trusted my gut then, but I didn't want to be the paranoid husband jumping to conclusions. Then things got worse. Her phone became a fortress. She would take it with her everywhere, even into the bathroom. And if I tried to look at it, she would snap, saying I was invading her privacy. I remember feeling that pit in my stomach, but I kept telling myself, it's nothing. You're just being insecure. Friends told me to talk to her, but I was afraid of looking foolish over accusations I couldn't prove. Finally, the moment came when everything changed. I had been picking up groceries on a random Tuesday afternoon, and as I walked past the electronics aisle, I saw a notification flash across Sarah's phone lying on the counter back home. It was from a guy named Mark, a name I didn't recognize. Curiosity got the better of me. I grabbed my own phone and texted her, pretending to be casual. Hey, how's work? I waited for her response, but instead I got a series of messages from Mark. They were explicit, detailing things that should have only been for her husband's ears. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I stood there in the grocery store, frozen. The world around me blurred. That's when I decided to go home. I didn't know what I was going to say to her, but I was ready to confront her. When I got home, Sarah was in the shower, the sound of the water hitting the tiles echoing in the silence of our house. I could hear the kids playing in the living room, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. I felt the anger rising, but at the same time I was terrified. This wasn't just about betrayal. This was about my family, our kids, and everything we had built. As I waited for her to come out, I played out the confrontation in my head. Would she deny it? Would she lie? I thought back to all those little signs I had ignored. I was ready for her, ready to rip off the Band-Aid and expose the infection underneath. When she finally stepped out, I could see the confusion on her face. The water droplets glistened on her skin, but all I could think about was the betrayal hidden behind that facade of marital bliss. Sarah, I said, my voice steady despite the chaos inside me, we need to talk. Her expression shifted and I could see the panic in her eyes. She must have known this wasn't going to go well. Can it wait? I was just about to cook dinner, she replied, trying to deflect. No, it can't wait. I know about Mark. Her face turned pale and she fumbled for words. It was in that moment I realized how much I had underestimated her ability to lie. What do you mean? Who is Mark? She stuttered, feigning innocence. I couldn't believe her audacity. My heart raced and I felt the anger boiling over. I pulled out my phone and showed her the messages. Stop acting. Just stop. Her excuses began to pour out, but all I could hear was the sound of my own heart breaking, splintering into pieces. The woman I loved was standing before me, but I didn't recognize her anymore. The confrontation spiraled into chaos, filled with accusations and denials, tears and anger. Sarah painted herself as the victim, claiming I had neglected her and pushed her away. But deep down, I knew it was all lies. As the evening wore on, I felt lost in a haze of competing emotions. I loved her, yet I was furious. I was heartbroken, yet I felt the urge for revenge bubbling beneath the surface. How could she? How could she betray me like this? The emotional impact of that night was profound. I felt like a fool for ever trusting her, for believing her lies, for thinking we were a happy family. I wondered if I had been blind to all the signs, or if I had simply chosen to ignore them because I didn't want to believe the truth. And then I made a decision. I was going to make her understand the gravity of her actions. I would show her that betrayal has consequences. The plan began to form in my mind, and with it, a sense of clarity. But before I went down that path, I needed to process everything. The emotional journey ahead was going to be a tough one, but I knew I couldn't let her get away with this. This was just the beginning, and I was ready for the storm to come. After that chaotic confrontation, I spent the night tossing and turning in bed, which felt more like a battlefield than a sanctuary. I couldn't help but replay every moment in my head. The look on Sarah's face when I confronted her was burned into my mind. The way she fumbled for excuses, how she tried to twist the narrative, made my skin crawl. It was clear that she thought she could charm her way out of this, but I wasn't going to let her. The next day, I went through a whirlwind of emotions: anger, sadness, confusion. I wanted to scream, to cry, to lash out at everyone and everything. Instead, I buried myself in work, trying to distract myself from the reality of my marriage crumbling around me. It felt as if every mundane task was a reminder of the facade I had been living under. I spent hours scrolling through social media, looking for anything that might give me more insight into her double life. I found a photo of Sarah and Mark at a beach, grinning, carefree. It was from a recent trip that she had claimed was a business conference with her colleagues. The sand in her shoes took on a new meaning. My heart sank further, and I felt a surge of betrayal that propelled me toward a cloud of anger and revenge. What made it worse was that Sarah had been planning on taking the kids to that same beach for a family vacation just a few weekends away. That was when it hit me, the realization that she had likely taken our children to the same place where she had been with him. It felt like something sharp was twisting in my gut. I imagined her smiling at him the way she used to smile at me. I couldn't let this go. Not now, not ever. So I started to formulate a plan. My mind was racing with ideas, each more dramatic than the last. I considered what would be most impactful, not just for her, but also for me. I wanted to make her understand what she had lost, but I also wanted to make sure it was something that would not just give me a moment of satisfaction, but would stick with her. I decided that I wouldn't just confront her again, I would expose her. I thought about getting evidence, photos, texts, anything I could use to show her that I knew what she was doing. I started following her when she left for work, all the while reminding myself of my purpose. Each morning, as she would kiss me goodbye, I wanted to scream, "You're lying to my face." But instead, I forced a smile and watched her drive off, plotting my next move. I set up my phone to record any conversations she had when she thought I wasn't around. I got creative, concocting scenarios that would allow me to catch her off guard, to see if she would slip up. One evening, after a particularly tense day, I waited for her to come home. I had set the stage perfectly. The kids were at a friend's house for a sleepover, and I had the house dimly lit, candles flickering, creating the illusion of romance. When she walked in, her face lit up momentarily until she realized the tension in the air. "Wow, this is nice," she said, feigning surprise. "What's the occasion?" I looked her dead in the eyes and responded, "We need to talk about Mark." Her face fell. She wasn't expecting me to confront her so openly. "What are you talking about?" she stammered, her voice shaky. "I know about the affair, Sarah. You can drop the act. I've seen the messages, the photos. I've been watching you." Her composure crumbled. "You don't understand. I was just trying to find myself again. You've been so busy with work and the kids, I needed something more." "More? You needed to go sleep with someone else. That's your idea of finding yourself." I shot back, my voice rising. She tried to put on a brave face, but I could see the cracks forming. "I'm sorry. It was a mistake. I thought it was just a fling." Just a fling. Those words struck me harder than I expected. It was like she was belittling the entire situation, trying to downplay the pain she had caused. The rage inside me boiled over. How could she not see the weight of her actions? I pulled out my phone and showed her the recordings I had made. "You think I'm some clueless husband? Look at this." The look on her face was priceless. It morphed from shock to panic. "You've been spying on me. That's messed up," she exclaimed, now defensive. "Maybe so, but you've given me every reason to." I need you to understand how serious this is. You think you can just waltz in and out of our lives, play house with someone else, and it won't have consequences. I'm going to make sure you remember this." I could see the realization dawning on her. This wasn't just a fight, it was the beginning of something much larger. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. As the confrontation continued, I felt a sense of empowerment. I was no longer the victim, I was taking control of my narrative. I was done feeling sorry for myself. I was ready to fight back, and I had a plan in place that would serve as both a wake-up call for her and a release for me. But deep down, I knew this wouldn't end well. I could feel the emotional toll starting to wear me down, and as much as I wanted to believe I was strong enough to handle this, there was still a part of me that felt the weight of heartbreak creeping in again. The aftermath of this confrontation would lead to some tough decisions, but I was determined to see my plan through. I wanted her to feel the pain she had inflicted on me, but I also knew that in doing so, I had to prepare myself for whatever fallout would follow. After that intense confrontation, I felt a mix of satisfaction and dread. I had finally called Sarah out on her lies, but I also knew that what lay ahead wouldn't be easy. It was a pivotal moment, not just for our marriage but for my own sense of self-worth. I had spent so long feeling like a fool, and now that I had taken a stand, I wasn't going to back down. But as the days turned into a week, the emotional aftermath began to settle on me like a heavy fog. I was wrestling with conflicting feelings, anger, betrayal, and a strange sense of loss. I had spent 7 years building a life with Sarah, and now it felt like everything had been shattered in an instant. I was still standing, but the ground beneath me felt unsteady. Sarah tried to apologize and explain herself over those days, her approach oscillating between remorse and outrage. She would plead with me to forgive her, claiming that it was a momentary lapse in judgment, a misguided attempt to feel desired again. "I never meant to hurt you," she would say, her voice trembling. But those words felt empty, especially after what I had seen. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the moments of deception. I couldn't shake off the image of her with Mark, the happiness they shared while I was left in the dark. It gnawed at my insides. The rage was boiling beneath the surface, but I had to channel it into something constructive, something that would make her truly understand the gravity of her actions. That's when I solidified my plan for revenge. It wasn't just about hurting her back. It was about making her see the consequences of her betrayal in a way that would stick with her. I wanted her to know that her actions had repercussions, and I was going to expose her infidelity to those who mattered most to her. I began gathering evidence, text messages, photos, anything that would paint a clear picture of her deceit. I knew that showing her friends and family what she had done would not only hurt her but would also make her think twice before she would ever consider cheating again. It felt like a gamble, but I was ready to risk it all. The first step was to confide in my best friend, Jake. I hadn't told him about the affair until that week. We had been friends for years, and I needed someone who would understand the depth of the situation. I met him for drinks, and as I recounted the events of the past few weeks, I could see the concern in his eyes. "Man, I'm so sorry you're going through this," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "I can't believe Sarah would do something like that. She always seemed like such a good person. Good on the outside, but she's been lying to me for months. I just can't fathom how she could throw everything away. I want her to feel the pain she's caused." Jake nodded, his expression serious. "I get it, just be careful with how you approach this. You don't want to do something you'll regret later." I appreciated his input, but I was already too far gone. I needed a plan that would hit hard. I started concocting scenarios in my mind. How I would reveal the truth, the look on her face when she realized I had outsmarted her. With that thought, I decided to set up a family dinner with Sarah, inviting her parents and a few close friends over. I wanted them to see the facade she had built and the reality behind it. I planned to lay out all the evidence at the dinner table, letting them discover her betrayal alongside me. It felt like a scene from a movie, but I couldn't shake the feeling that it was justice I was seeking. As the day of the dinner approached, I felt a mix of nervousness and anticipation. I spent hours preparing, making sure the house looked perfect. I wanted everything to seem normal. The kids would be excited, and Sarah would be oblivious to the storm that was about to hit. The night arrived, and I felt a knot in my stomach as I heard Sarah bustle around the kitchen, acting like everything was fine. My heart pounded as I put the final touches on the table setting. When guests started arriving, I plastered on a smile, welcoming everyone as if nothing were amiss. Sarah greeted her parents with warmth and laughter, completely unaware of the truth I held in my pocket. Dinner began, and the conversation flowed. We talked about the kids, shared stories, and laughed about memories, but I couldn't shake the feeling of impending doom. As we moved through the courses, I kept glancing at Sarah, watching her interact with everyone, a mask of normalcy covering her deceit. Finally, as we sat down for dessert, I knew it was time. I cleared my throat, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. "Hey, everyone, can I have your attention for a moment? There's something I think you all need to know." The room fell silent, and I could see the confusion on Sarah's face as she glanced at me, a flicker of concern in her eyes. "What is it?" she asked, her voice betraying her unease. I took a deep breath, pulled out my phone, and opened the folder where I had saved everything: texts, photos, and even the recording of her denying everything. "What I'm about to show you is the real Sarah," I said, my voice steady as I began playing the recordings. Gasps filled the room as her parents and friends listened. I watched as realization hit them, their expressions shifting from shock to disbelief. Sarah's face transformed from confusion to horror as the truth unfolded before her. "You're a liar," I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. "You've betrayed all of us, and now it's time for you to take responsibility for your actions." The emotional fallout from that moment was palpable. I could see Sarah's world crumbling around her, and in that instant I felt a sense of catharsis. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about unveiling the truth and reclaiming my power. But with that power came the realization that I was about to step into a new chapter, one filled with uncertainty about what would come next. I had exposed her, but now I had to face the consequences of my own decisions. Would this lead to the end of our marriage, or could we rebuild from the ashes? As the evening drew to a close, I knew that whatever happened next would define who we were going to be moving forward. There was no turning back now. The dinner had been a revelation, not just for Sarah but for everyone in the room, including me. As the recordings played and the evidence was laid bare, I could see the expressions shift on her parents' faces, from shock to disappointment, and finally to anger. Her father's eyes narrowed, and I could sense the confusion and hurt swirling around the table like an invisible storm. "What the hell, Sarah?" her mother finally exclaimed, her voice trembling. "How could you do this to your family?" It hit me then that in exposing Sarah, I had also exposed myself. The ripples of her betrayal affected not just me but everyone who cared about her. I could see Sarah's facade crumbling as her mother's words hit her like daggers. I can explain," she stammered, her voice barely above a whisper, but the fight was gone from her. The anger she had displayed during our earlier confrontations had evaporated, replaced by a desperate attempt to salvage what remained of her dignity. I didn't want to hear excuses anymore. My heart had been trampled one too many times. "There's nothing to explain, Sarah. You made your choice," I said, my voice firm. "You chose him over us. You chose your lies over our family." Her friends looked on in disbelief, some visibly shaken, others whispering to one another. I had expected judgment from them, but what I found was a shared sense of outrage. They hadn't known the truth, and now they were witnessing the fallout of her deception firsthand. The air in the room felt thick with tension, and I could sense the anger bubbling beneath the surface. I had anticipated Sarah's outburst, but I didn't expect her to crumble into tears. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably, and for a brief moment I felt a flicker of sympathy. But the anger quickly overshadowed it. This wasn't about pity, this was about accountability. "Get it together, Sarah," I snapped, the frustration pouring out. "You've hurt too many people for me to feel sorry for you now." Her father stood up, the chair scraping against the floor, drawing everyone's attention. "I can't believe this. We raised you better than this. What were you thinking?" He was visibly shaken, his voice a mix of disappointment and disbelief. "This has nothing to do with you," she shot back, her bravado returning momentarily. You don't know what I've been through. That's the problem, Sarah. I interjected, my voice rising again. You never bothered to tell any of us. Instead, you chose to betray your husband and the father of your children. You put yourself first, and now you're going to face the consequences. As her parents continued to process the situation, I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and dread. I had pulled the trigger on this explosive reveal, but the aftershocks were far-reaching. Would Sarah's family turn against her? Would I become the villain in this story? I had anticipated anger from Sarah, but I hadn't prepared for the aftermath. As her friends began to quietly leave, one by one, Sarah's facade was stripped away completely. She looked raw, exposed, and vulnerable in a way I had never seen before. I had taken the reins in our relationship, but the fallout was far from over. The kids were going to be the hardest part. How would I explain this to them? Would they blame me? Would they understand? Those thoughts gnawed at me as I watched Sarah collapse into herself. I can't believe you did this. She finally looked up at me, her eyes red and puffy from crying. You've ruined everything. Everything was ruined the moment you decided to betray our marriage, I replied, my heart racing with the weight of her words. You might think you're the victim here, but you're not. You made choices that have consequences, and you need to face them. The realization of what I had done began to sink in. I had exposed her, but I was also exposing myself to the inevitable fallout. I would have to stand my ground and be prepared for whatever would happen next. As the evening wore on, I could feel the tension between us growing. Sarah was no longer the confident woman I had married. She was a shell of her former self, grappling with the consequences of her actions. I knew that deep down she was ashamed, but would it be enough to change her? We need to talk about the kids, I said, cutting through the silence. They don't deserve to be caught in this mess. Her expression shifted from anger to resignation. I know, I don't know what to say to them. That's up to you, but they deserve the truth even if it hurts. In that moment, I felt a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, resolve. I was determined to protect our children, to shield them from the whirlwind that was about to engulf our family. I wanted them to have clarity, even if it meant facing the harsh realities of their parents' unraveling marriage. As I ushered Sarah to the living room to discuss the next steps, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. It was one thing to confront her in private, but now the whole world would know about her infidelity. I had lost the wife I thought I knew, and I was left to navigate the fallout in a way that would protect my kids from the storm ahead. The emotional journey would be long and painful, but I was resolute. I had taken a stand, and I needed to be the strong one for the children. I would figure out how to rebuild, whether it would be together with Sarah or apart. One thing was clear: I would no longer be a victim in my own life. As we sat down to talk, I took a deep breath, ready to face the next chapter of our lives together or apart. The future was uncertain, but I was prepared to embrace it, come what may. The days following the explosive dinner were a whirlwind of tension and raw emotion. I had opened a Pandora's box, and now I was left to sift through the chaos that ensued. Sarah, once the center of my life, was now a stranger, a woman I thought I knew, but who had betrayed me in ways I never imagined. We decided to sit down with the kids that weekend, the moment I had been dreading the most. I had rehearsed countless ways to explain the situation, but nothing could prepare me for the pain I would see in their innocent eyes. I wanted to shield them from the fallout of our crumbling marriage, but I knew that honesty, however painful, was essential. As we gathered in the living room, the kids bounced in with their usual energy, blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in the air. I could feel Sarah sitting next to me, her tension palpable. She was a shadow of her former self, a woman who had once been so vibrant and full of life, now reduced to anxious silence. "Hey guys," I started, my voice trembling slightly. "We need to talk about something important." "What's up, Dad?" my son Jake asked, his innocent curiosity tugging at my heartstrings. My daughter Lily sat beside him, her legs swinging back and forth as she chewed on her nails, sensing something was amiss. Sarah's eyes darted nervously, and I wondered if she would even be able to speak. "It's about Mom and me," I continued, trying to keep my voice steady. "You know how sometimes grown-ups have problems. Well, we've been having some issues. Is it because you don't love each other anymore?" Lily asked, her big brown eyes wide with worry. It felt like a knife twisting in my stomach. It's more complicated than that, I replied, trying to choose my words carefully. Mom made some choices that hurt our family, and it's going to take some time for us to figure things out. What kind of choices? Jake pressed, his brow furrowed with confusion. I glanced at Sarah, searching for a cue, but she remained silent, her lips trembling. It's about trust, buddy. Sometimes people do things that hurt other people, and it can break that trust. Did Mom do something bad? Jake's voice was small, almost muffled by the weight of the question. Yes, I finally admitted, feeling the heaviness of the truth settle like a stone in my heart. She made some very wrong decisions, and it's caused a lot of pain. The atmosphere in the room shifted as realization dawned on the kids. Lily's eyes filled with tears and she sniffled. But I don't want you to get a divorce. I felt my heart break. We don't know what's going to happen yet, sweetheart, but we'll always be your parents no matter what. Sarah finally found her voice, but it was shaky and filled with regret. I'm so sorry, you two. I never wanted to hurt you. I love you more than anything. The words felt hollow. Would her apologies be enough to mend the broken trust? I watched my children, their innocence shattered by adult mistakes. It was a heavy burden to bear, and I felt the urge to protect them from the realities of our situation, but they deserved to know the truth. Mom, why did you do it? Jake asked, his voice wavering with emotion. Sarah hesitated, her eyes darting between the kids and me. I was lost, and I made a terrible mistake. I thought I could find happiness elsewhere, but I was wrong. I love you both so much. Her explanations felt inadequate, and I could see the hurt in my kids' faces as they absorbed the reality of the situation. My anger flared again at Sarah's words. This wasn't just about her lost happiness. It was about the fracture in our family, the confusion it was sowing in our kids. We're going to need some time to figure this out, I said, trying to keep my voice calm for the sake of my children. Things might change, but we will get through this together, okay? I wanted to believe those words, but I knew. We were standing on shaky ground. The kids nodded, but I could see the fear in their eyes. It was a fear I had never wanted them to experience. As they left the room, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me. I had exposed their mother, but I had also thrown them into a whirlwind of confusion, forcing them to grapple with adult issues far too early. That night, after the kids were tucked in bed, Sarah and I found ourselves in the living room, silence enveloping us like a heavy blanket. The weight of our choices hung in the air, and I could feel the tension pulsing between us. I don't know how to fix this, she finally muttered, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you even want to fix it? I shot back, the bitterness creeping into my tone. Of course I do. I never meant for any of this to happen, she pleaded, desperation creeping into her voice. I was just trying to find something I thought I lost. That's the problem, Sarah. You thought you could find happiness outside our marriage instead of working on what we had. You chose to cheat, and that choice has consequences. I didn't think it would come to this. I thought it was just a fling, something to escape the mundane. I never thought I'd hurt you like this, she said, her voice shaking as she fought back tears. Yet here we are, I replied, my heart heavy. You shattered our family, and now we have to pick up the pieces. I felt a surge of anger, but mixed with that was a profound sadness. This wasn't just about my pain. It was about our children and the life we built together. I had to accept that the road ahead would be difficult, and I wasn't sure if we could come back from this, but I wasn't willing to let her off the hook either. We talked late into the night, hashing out the remnants of our relationship amid the tears and anger. I wanted to believe that we could rebuild, but the path was uncertain. Trust had been broken, and while her remorse was palpable, it felt like an uphill battle to even consider forgiveness. The next morning, as I sipped my coffee, I stared out the window. Reflecting on the turmoil, I saw the kids playing in the yard, and my heart ached for them. They deserved so much more than this mess. I made a decision. I needed to focus on healing, not just for me, but for them. Whether that meant rebuilding the marriage or separating, it was time to prioritize our children and their well-being. I couldn't allow Sarah's choices to dictate the trajectory of our family's future. It was a long road ahead, filled with uncertainty and heartache, but I knew that I needed to be strong for the kids. That was my priority now. I could no longer be a victim of circumstance. I had to take charge of my life and our family's future. The rest would come as we navigated this rocky path together. The following weeks were a blur of emotions as Sarah and I navigated the aftermath of that fateful dinner. The initial shock had worn off, but the reality of our situation set in like a heavy shroud. We were still living under the same roof, but it felt as though we were mere strangers sharing the same space. Our conversations were awkward and strained, and the children sensed the tension, which only made my heart ache deeper. I focused on maintaining a semblance of normalcy for the kids. We established a routine school, dinner, bedtime stories, trying to shield them from the unraveling of our adult lives. I wanted them to feel safe, to know that despite the chaos, I would always be their rock. Sarah would join us for family outings, but the laughter we once shared felt forced, an echo of what our family had been. Meanwhile, I pushed myself to confront my own feelings. Anger was easy, it fueled my resolve, but sadness crept in like an unwelcome guest. I found myself questioning everything, the love we had built, the dreams we once shared. How could she betray me? How could I have been so blind? In those moments of introspection, I realized that I needed to make a choice. I couldn't keep living in limbo, hoping for a miracle to fix what had been shattered. It was time to confront the future head-on, whether that meant working on our marriage or letting go of what we once had. I proposed to Sarah that we see a marriage counselor. At first, she hesitated, her pride still wounded from the exposure of her infidelity, but I made it clear that this was about more than just us. It was about healing for our kids. Reluctantly, she agreed, and we began attending sessions together. Those counseling sessions were a roller coaster. Some days we made progress, digging deep into the roots of our issues, and other days felt like an uphill struggle, filled with arguments and raw emotions. I laid bare my feelings of betrayal, and she voiced her fears of losing her family. I began to see glimmers of the woman I had fallen in love with, buried beneath the weight of her mistakes. One evening, as we left a particularly emotional session, Sarah turned to me. "I want to try. I want to take responsibility for what I did. I want to be better," she said, her voice earnest. I could see the genuine desire for change in her eyes, and it gave me a flicker of hope. But hope was a tricky thing, especially when trust had been so thoroughly shattered. I had to remind myself that rebuilding would take time, and I needed to be patient, not just with her but also with myself. I realized that my own healing journey was just as critical as hers. As the counseling continued, we began to rebuild our communication, learning how to express our needs without placing blame. I discovered that her infidelity had stemmed from feelings of inadequacy and a desire for validation, while I had become so focused on work and the kids that I failed to recognize her struggles. We both had a part in this breakdown of our marriage. Throughout this process, I learned valuable lessons about love and forgiveness. I had to confront the darkest corners of my heart, facing my feelings of anger and betrayal, but also allowing room for compassion. I learned that it was okay to feel hurt, but it was also necessary to let go of that hurt to move forward. Several months later, as we sat together at the dining table, the kids laughing and playing in the background, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. It wasn't perfect, and I knew we still had a long way to go, but there was a sense of hope I hadn't felt in a long time. "Thank you for not giving up on us," Sarah said quietly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I know I've made mistakes and I'm working on being better." I nodded, my heart full of conflicting emotions. "It's going to take time, but I'm willing to try, for our kids and for us." We both understood that rebuilding trust wouldn't happen overnight, but we were committed to the journey. We learned to communicate better, spending evenings talking and reconnecting, slowly reigniting the spark that had been buried under layers of hurt. As the seasons changed and time moved forward, we found ourselves gradually shifting from pain to healing. We began to enjoy small moments together, a quiet watch of our favorite show, cooking dinner as a team, taking the kids to the park. While the scars of betrayal would always be there, they served as reminders of how far we had come. I realized that forgiveness was not a linear path. It was a journey filled with ups and downs. As I reflect on the entire situation, I've learned invaluable lessons about love, trust, and resilience. We may never return to the version of our marriage we once had, but in many ways, we were creating something new, stronger, and more authentic. If there's any advice I could give to someone facing a similar situation, it would be this: don't rush into decisions out of anger or hurt. Take the time to reflect, communicate, and seek help if needed. Understand that healing is a process, and while it's tough, it can lead to a deeper understanding of each other and yourself. Life is unpredictable. It can throw us into dark places, but with persistence and honesty, it can also lead us toward unexpected growth. I may have started this journey feeling like a victim, but I emerged as a man committed to embracing the complexities of love and forgiveness, no matter how challenging the road may be.